Lando Norris. Perfect young driver and every 14-year-old girl's dream. Let's chat. Today we're going to be talking about, is Lando Norris a bad teammate? First thing I want to say, Lando Norris is my favourite driver on the grid. He's the reason I got into F1. A lot of the reason why people did, because, you know, he sort of seeped into what I was watching on like Twitch and YouTube, and then I learned about F1 a little bit, watched Drive to Survive, got into Formula 1. Now he's my favourite driver and I like McLaren and all other stuff. So obviously I like Lando Norris, but that's why it's interesting to talk about this. Is he a bad teammate? And another reason I got this idea, watching Drive to Survive, I didn't even watch the whole episode because didn't really want to watch, you know, it still kind of hurts. I'm not like a Lewis fan, but I did want Lewis to win, and it's still too soon. Red Flags podcast, they were talking about Drive to Survive and some Lando Norris moments, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought, is Lando Norris a bad teammate? And firstly, is it possible to even be a bad teammate in Formula 1? And what does being a bad teammate even mean? Because in most sports, being a bad teammate would be like not passing the ball to your teammate, or being greedy, or being selfish, or whatever. But in Formula 1, it's hard to say, because doing those things, being selfish, would make you a better driver in some aspects. Just always, you could be a good teammate in the sense that Bottas is a good teammate to Lewis, but it's at the detriment of his own career. I don't know what the definition is, so I asked someone with way more knowledge than me, and I'm going to use their definition. So let's do that. John Warren. I asked John, I said, hey man, trying to make an F1 video, just trying to define what a good teammate is basically. How would you describe a good F1 teammate? Is it even a thing? I think it depends on what sort of teammate you want. If you're a driver competing for championships and you want a teammate that will support you, regularly finish second, defend against your rivals, and be able to pick up the pieces when you have a good race. If you're a midfield driver, then you want a teammate who pushes you. Sure, every driver wants to beat their teammate, but if they dominate, then they won't be able to really flex their driving muscles. You want a teammate who is willing to share setups or advice on lines around corners. If you're a rookie, then you need a teammate who isn't. You can learn off them. Think Raikkonen and Giovinazzi, or Tsunoda and Gasly. You can then just adjust to the pressures of F1, learn a bit off them, and not have the huge pressure necessarily to beat them in your first year. You know, and this is someone who knows the sport way better than me. Like I said, I think I only got into it. I think I've only seen one full season. I think I've seen 1.5 seasons of F1, about to go into the second, obviously. Of his definition here, Lando is not a rookie driver, and he's not a driver competing for a championship. They have finished third, but they finished fourth last year. They are a midfield team. So the definition for a midfield team, he said, is you want a midfield driver who will push you. He also said for the midfield driver, you want a teammate who is willing to share setups or advice on lines around corners. Now, I don't know if Lando Norris is doing that, but mainly the reason I wanted to say on Lando Norris, obviously everyone thought Lando and Daniel would get on great because they're both chill, fun guys, and this is basically, I'm quoting Lando here when he said, but they are different. Now, obviously, Drive to Survive do certain things. Look, they've done it with Lando and Carlos, right? They hype it up a little bit to make it seem a little bit more interesting than it really is, and there's not as much beef as there is. I'm sure they get on fine, but not perfectly. A couple stories you looked at here is how the second Lando lost to Daniel Ricciardo, it hurt, and he was kind of sulking a little bit. That's completely healthy and natural. You want to always beat your teammate. I think it's just interesting to see how Lando reacts when losing to his teammate, to how Daniel reacts to losing to his teammate, and to how, if Lando had the season Daniel had, how would he have reacted and acted compared to how Daniel did. The whole thing about not feeling sorry for Daniel, I think it's fine and grown up in itself. I just, when they then were, you know, questioned on it, and he said, he doubled down and said, I don't feel sorry for Daniel, and then turns to Daniel and says, unless you want me to, in the biggest like fucking fuck you to Daniel there is. Like you can only imagine how embarrassed Daniel would be in that moment. Daniel, when he was about to win that race and Lando was in P2 and was saying Daniel's going too slow, he wants to overtake, you know, a lot of that is just being competitive and wanting to be the one with the glory. He's the McLaren man who's signed the multi-year deal, wants to win the race. He knows they're probably both going to get the 1 or 2, but he wants to be the number one. Again, this is all healthy stuff and can look toxic from the outside from people who maybe don't really like sports or know how competitive people are who actually are, you know, competitive like professional athletes. And this is still just the first teammate we've seen Lando with since Carlos, so it's hard to say, considering we know Carlos and Lando was kind of the perfect driver combination there. Like the relationship they had off the track helped them perform great on the track, and it was competitive in a healthy way, because the last thing you want is competitive when you start crashing into each other, which I guess we'll see if that ever happens in this season when Daniel actually picks up the pace, which I'm hoping he does. Because to me, the main reason I guess I'm trying to say is Lando a bad teammate is because I feel like he basically loved Carlos, right? And even more than he probably let off. And basically anyone who now comes in and fills those shoes will just never be the same as his ex Carlos, and he'll want to be the leader. Another interesting thing that John Warren said was, even though Lando's not a rookie, he said if you are a rookie, it's good to have someone older who can learn off and not have huge pressures on trying to beat. Now Lando's not a rookie, but when they went into the season, everyone said Ricciardo is someone you should be trying to learn off of, whereas I think Lando thinks he's miles better than him. And although it looked like Ricciardo's kind of on the decline in his career and he's not been in electric form, I think there is still stuff Lando could definitely learn achievement off of Ricciardo. Whether he agrees with that or not, I think it's just true through experience and knowledge. Maybe Lando being lulled into a false sense of achievement, maybe arrogance, thinking there's nothing to learn off Daniel because he showcased that he's now like a better driver with how they performed, could make you a bad teammate in certain scenarios, situations where you feel like you know what's best for the team and that you feel like you should be getting the Hamilton treatment over Ricciardo. Ultimately, it's just a shitty little topic here. Lando is probably not a bad teammate. There's been far worse. And it is really hard to say until we see them in more scenarios where they're actually closer to each other on track, and maybe Lando's in a position where he needs to sacrifice himself for Daniel, because I haven't seen that enough yet. I just kind of get the urge that it won't be as plain sailing as it has been the other way around. If Daniel's winning and Lando has to be the one on the losing end, I don't know how that would feel for his ego, because obviously all the drivers will have massive egos and will hate losing. But it's about how you use that and how you behave with that. That's going to define, how helpful you are being to the team. Good teammate, sharing racing lines and how the best way to take corners is. For example, being so competitive that you want to beat your teammate. You're not going to share stuff like that. Again, I guess we just still haven't seen enough yet. We need Daniel to get more competitive to know if Lando is a bad teammate to Daniel, because at the moment they've been so far apart, it's just hard to say. Lando is the royalty, like he is the prince of that team. He's got the multi-year deal. He's the face of McLaren. He's so marketable. He's great on social media and he's a great driver. I sound like Christian Horner right now. Daniel will hate that. Like, people talk about the footballers all the time. Like, when you just got people blowing smoke up your ass, like, it's impossible not to get a bit of an ego and a big head and think you are the shit. And that is no more prevalent than a sport like Formula One, the amount of hype you get around you. It just depends how Lando harnesses that for me to decide. And I guess I can decide by the end of the season of what kind of teammate he is and what kind of driver he is. Still my favorite driver though, but yeah.